Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the humble one, the merciful one, the Argentine Pope, the Pope of the people who likes to smell the sheep, issued an encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, recently. But is it even an encyclical? It is said Pope Francis issued 3 encyclicals. Some might say, no, just 2. Recently, somebody actually said the last one isn't even an encyclical. And that was Dr. Taylor Marshall. Welcome, Catholicos, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, all who seek the truth. I was going to do a full video analyzing the latest encyclical of Francis, but I started looking at it, it's like so long, and there's so much to deal with. And whenever I do a 3-4 hour video, nobody watches it, or very few people watch it. So I thought, I'm not going to waste my time. So Taylor Marshall, actually, I watched his video and I'll put a link to it, or you can just go to it yourself. It is on his Dr. Taylor Marshall YouTube channel, and it was he did the video on October 6th, 2020, analyzing basically Pope Francis's latest encyclical, as we shall see, in 8 points. So his number 1 point, which actually is the point of this video, and I was actually surprised by what I found. I'll let you know in a second. But he basically analyzed the video, the encyclical Fratelli Tutti in 8 points. Number 1, is it a valid encyclical? Is it even an encyclical? Number 2, it was about racism. Number 3, interreligious dialogue and false ecumenism. Number 4, immigration and private property, basically socialism. Number 5, liberty, equality, and fraternity, which is basically the slogan of the Freemasonic French Revolution, which of course Francis admires. Number 6 was dignity of women. Number 7 was capital punishment and just war, which of course Francis's rejection of capital punishment is heretical because it defies the teaching of God himself. And number 8, the United Nations, international politics. So I'll let you watch the video. It's an hour-long video. It's worth your watch if you don't want to spend hours and hours going over the Fratelli Tutti document. Let's call it by what it is, a letter, a document, not truly an encyclical. And why do I say that? I mean, I didn't even think of it in the first place until I watched a video by Dr. Taylor Marshall, and he said, and I'll quote you what he said at the end of his video, and actually he mentions it at the beginning as well. And then we were going to go through what is an encyclical. This is not going to be a very long video, maybe half hour, maybe 35 minutes, whatever, however long it takes. What is an encyclical from a Catholic point of view, and do these encyclicals of Francis actually correspond to what an encyclical is? And that'll be it. But you'll be surprised that in fact Francis never wrote not even one encyclical, not just the last one, as Dr. Taylor Marshall mentions. But I'll quote you what he said, and then from there we will jump into the topic completely. All right. So this is what he said at the end of his video, and I'm quoting him. I wrote down what he wrote. He said, "I don't think this is a real encyclical. It is not addressed to the patriarchs, primates, bishops, local ordinaries, and those in communion with the Apostolic See, as all previous encyclicals were." We're going to quibble about the all part, but he is, in general, absolutely correct. It's just an open letter to the world. That's what Fratelli Tutti is. And as I'm still quoting with Dr. Taylor Marshall, he says, and if it is an open letter to the world, does it bind a Muslim? No. Does it bind an atheist? No. Does it bind a Hindu? No. Does it bind a Chinese person? I guess he meant a Buddhist, a Taoist, and the answer, of course, is no. He didn't mention, say, well, how about a Japanese person, maybe a Shintoist? No. Does it bind a Catholic? And of course, and his answer is, I don't think so. Well, if it doesn't bind anybody else, and it's actually not even addressed to Catholics, but doesn't bind anything. It is just a bunch of talk. It's a letter. It's a reflection. And actually, Pope Francis, says as much. And we will see. So, let's get going now. This is what actually is wow. Is this right? Is Dr. Taylor Marshall actually correct in his assessment of what he says? So I had to go double check because I was, as I said, planning on doing a whole video on the encyclical, and then I decided against it. There's too much time to waste on it. So here it is from Father Joseph Parsi. What is an encyclical? An encyclical is a pastoral letter addressed by the Pope to the whole Church. That is, by definition, what a papal encyclical is. It's an encyclical, is a pastoral letter addressed by the Pope to the whole Church. So the Bishop of Rome himself would write letters to be circulated to all the bishops. So this is, and basically the encyclicals were not used much in the past, and more papal bulls, decretals, all kinds of other documents. In the early church, like you see Clement of Rome writing a letter, an encyclical, to the church in, I don't remember now, it's in the Apostolic Fathers' writings. Was it in Carthage, or I don't recall right now. But this is an encyclical letter of the Pope to specific kingdom or a specific region with its bishops and people, the faithful. So, and it says here, Father Parsi continues as Pope Benedict XIV, so 1740, 1758, he says, wisely employed the power of the newly invented printing press, revived the ancient practice of the Pope writing letters to all the bishops of the world, or to specific regions, but it's always to the Church, whether the whole universal Church or the Church, the Catholic Church in France, the Catholic Church in Antioch, the Catholic Church in Italy, the Catholic Church in France, whatever. It was Pope Gregory XVI who applied the term encyclical to these letters. So now we can see it is a letter, but there's now it is currently, it is distinguished. There are letters and there are encyclicals. If you look at the main page of the Vatican.va website, the official Vatican website, you'll see in the divisions under whichever pope it is, and right now it is Pope Francis, you'll see different categories, audiences, constitutions, letters, and encyclicals. So they actually do a distinction between letters, even though an encyclical is a letter, but they are actually distinct categories now. And as we will see, this encyclical, or actually all the encyclicals of Francis, could be categorized at the most as letters. There's almost not even that dogmatic. It's almost like his airplane interviews. So it is, it says, Pope Gregory XVI, who applied the term encyclical to these letters from the Latin word encyclicus, or circular, because they were addressed to the entire Church. They're addressed to the entire Church, not the world, and not to people of other religions. It is encyclical, is to the Church. And he continues basically quoting Pius XII. That's encyclical letters are not considered divinely inspired and do not contain matters considered to be new revelation, as for example that the capital punishment or the death penalty is inadmissible, or that just war does not is against basically the Catholic religion or Christianity. So as the new encyclical basically implies, and actually Pope Francis decided to put that the death penalty is inadmissible in his to pervert the catechism of the Catholic Church to state heresy, basically, because God himself commanded the death penalty. So he says here, Pius XII says, like the encyclical teachings in encyclicals, teachings, not reflections, not thoughts, not opinions, but teachings in encyclical belong to the ordinary magisterium. And why is that? Because what is expounded and indicated in encyclical letters already appertains to Catholic doctrine. So because it's already in Catholic doctrine, so it's not inventing something new. So that is what makes an encyclical an encyclical. Again, in the website called Papal Encyclicals, it says, so it is quoting the Catholic Encyclopedia of what an encyclical is. And it's a circular, it is a meaning circle. It is from the Greek word for a circle, and it's a circular letter. And it is basically, encyclicals are explicitly addressed to, that's from the Catholic Encyclopedia. So encyclicals are explicitly addressed to the patriarchs, primates, archbishops, and bishops of the Universal Church in communion with the Apostolic See. So basically to the whole, to the bishops, archbishops, to the hierarchy. By exception, encyclicals are sometimes addressed to the archbishops and bishops of a particular country. So basically, it is addressed to the hierarchy, and because for them to pass that teaching to the rest of the faithful, the rest of the Catholics, the rest of the Christians. But by exception, encyclicals are sometimes addressed to the bishops of a certain country. That is what an encyclical is. It is to the bishops, to the patriarchs, to the Catholics. It is not some letter to the world. So it says the 1917 Catholic Superior Entry on Bulls and Briefs further explains other papal documents. So again, in official language, papal documents have at all times been called by various names, more or less descriptive of their character, of their nature, of what they are. And then he gives examples of constitutions, encyclicals, which are what they are, what is their nature, what is their character, are letters sent to all bishops of Christendom, or at least to all those in one particular country, and intended to guide them in their relations with their flocks. That's what an encyclical is. And there are decrees, decretals, rescripts, and privileges, and these are all the nature of these things. All right, so that is, and it continues actually from the encyclopedia itself. The Catholic Encyclopedia of 1917 says, from the nature of the case, encyclicals addressed to the bishops of the world are generally concerned with matters which affect the welfare of the church at large. So it affects the welfare of the church. It doesn't affect, the environment or recycling or, politics and the UN and world government. No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. So what do the encyclicals do? They condemn some prevalent form of error, point out dangers which threaten faith or morals, exhort the faithful to constancy, or prescribe remedies for evils foreseen or already existent. All right, so this is what an encyclical is. So basically an encyclical, as distinct, it is a letter. They say an encyclical letter. So now, as I said, there's letters and encyclicals, even though an encyclical is a letter, but the encyclical is directed to and addressed to the bishops, patriarchs, archbishops of the whole world and the whole Catholic faithful through their bishops, through the representative of Christ, of the apostles in their diocese. It is not addressed to, a political leader. It's a letter still. It's a papal letter. He wrote him a letter to whoever leader a pope might write to. That's a letter, but it's not an encyclical. So encyclicals, again, are to the bishops, patriarchs, primates, Catholic faithful. So here are a few examples, and beginning with Benedict XIV, who restarted using the printing press to reissue encyclicals one more time. So a few examples, and then we're going to go to Benedict XV, XVI, and Francis, and see what it is. And there's actually a surprise encyclical, of a recent pope and it's a controversial one, and it turned out to be, it matches the criteria, the lack of criteria of being an encyclical as Pope Francis's last encyclicals are, and we will get to it at the end with Pope Francis's encyclicals, so-called. So here are a few examples. So Benedict XVI, encyclical Ubi Primum. It says Benedict XIV, addressing to his encyclical letter to the venerable brothers, patriarchs, primates, archbishops, and bishops. Pope Benedict XIV, venerable brothers, health and apostolic blessing. And then Clement XIII. These are just examples, and you can find all of them in the Vatican website, vatican.va. You can go to the various popes, press the writings. If they have it all uploaded, they have a good amount. You can find it. And then you have encyclical of Clement XIII. Who is it addressed to? To the venerable brothers, patriarchs, primates, metropolitans, and to all the bishops who enjoy grace and communion with the Apostolic See, the See of Peter. Pius VI, to the cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, to the venerable archbishops, bishops, and to all the beloved administrators, sons of the diocese in the Kingdom of France. So this one is addressed to France of Pius XII, and of course to the cardinals. And then here from Pius VII, to all the faith, to this one addressed to all Christians, to all Catholics. Pope Pius said, to all the faithful of Christ who will read this letter, greetings and apostolic blessing. It is always to the church. An encyclical letter is a papal letter addressed to the church, to go in a circle, encyclical, in the Church of God, which is the Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now we come to the modern era, starting with John the 23rd. In his encyclical Mater et Magistra. So who is he addressing his encyclical to? To his venerable brethren, the patriarchs, primates, archbishops and bishops, and all other local ordinaries that are in peace and in communion with the Apostolic See, and to the clergy and faithful of the entire Catholic world. That's what an encyclical is. You have to address it to somebody. I can't be talking to a tree and call it an encyclical. I can't be chatting with my, writing. The title must match the content. And who is it addressed to? If it is addressed to the Catholic Church, it's addressed to the bishops and patriarchs and to the faithful, it is by the Pope, and it is an encyclical. And title it an encyclical. But you can't title a letter calling it an encyclical when it is not addressing the faithful or the church. It is just a general letter. That's John the 23rd. Paul the 6th. Mysterium Fidei. So again, to his venerable brothers, the patriarchs, primates, archbishops, bishops, and local ordinaries, meaning the local bishops, in peace and communion with the Apostolic See, and to the clergy and faithful of the entire world. Faithful means Catholic faithful. John Paul II. To the bishops, priests, and deacons, men and women in the consecrated life, and to all the lay faithful on the Eucharist in its relation to the Church. Now we get to the cool stuff, I guess. Benedict XVI. So his first letter, his first encyclical, as distinct from letters, as distinct from audiences, as distinct from constitutions. Encyclical letter, Deus Caritas Est, of the Supreme Pontiff Benedict XVI. Who is it addressed to? To the bishops, priests, and deacons, men and women religious, and all the lay faithful on Christian love. And of course, word bishops, patriarchs are bishops, archbishops are bishops, metropolitans are bishops. So the word bishop is includes all. So it is kind of more of a simplified, but it is still addressed to the hierarchy, the clergy, the religious, and the lay faithful, to the Church. That is the point of it. His second encyclical, again, Spe Salvi. So Benedict XVI, who is addressed to the bishops, priests, and deacons, men and women religious, and all lay faithful of Christian hope. His third encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, of the Supreme Pontiff Benedict XVI, again, who is it addressed to? To the bishops, priests, and deacons, men and women religious, the lay faithful, and all the people of good. Now here we have the addition, which is not a bad thing, to all the people of goodwill, on integral human development in charity and truth. But it is clearly and explicitly addressed to the bishops, priests, deacons, religious, and Catholic faithful. In addition, anyone of goodwill, they're not bound to it, but it is for them to read. I mean, it's an invitation to look at. Now we come to the first so-called encyclical of Francis, Lumen Fidei, the light of faith. And the title is Encyclical Letter Lumen Fidei of the Supreme Pontiff Francis to the bishops, priests, deacons, consecrated persons, and lay faithful on faith, which matches pretty much to the bishops, priests, deacons, men and women religious, and lay faithful, exactly like what Benedict says. To the bishops, priests, deacons, men and women religious, and all lay faithful on Christian hope. So exact words which Benedict uses. Is that an accident? No. Reason is, this so-called first encyclical of Francis is in fact Benedict XVI's fourth encyclical. Francis just put his name there because he's technically now the bishop dressed in white. He is in the Vatican, even though Pope Benedict is in the Vatican as well. Now we have two popes. So he just put so Francis is doing the power for governance, which Benedict XVI gave up the power for governance, but not the office. Watch my video on Benedict calling himself that he is ontologically Pope. He cannot, like a father is always a father, he is a Pope, he's always a Pope. That's in his mind, that is what he specifically said. So Francis, as the administrator who has the power for governance, as Bishop of Rome, put his name there on Benedict XVI's fourth encyclical. Not me saying that, everybody's saying that. Even America Magazine in 2013, America Magazine is a Jesuit journal. It is 100% modernist. It is 100% behind Pope Francis. It hates Benedict XVI, but even they have to admit it is Benedict's encyclical. Francis just put his name on it. So here's a little article printed July 4th, 2013. Francis on the Light of Faith, which is his first so-called encyclical, which is in fact Benedict's fourth encyclical. First responses to an encyclical written by four hands, meaning his two hands, and actually meaning Benedict's two hands and Francis's two hands. That's four hands. That's what Francis said. So, again, in this article, what does it say? The America Magazine, remember, it's America Magazine, a Jesuit modernist journal. Much of the encyclical shows the thinking of Benedict. Much of the encyclical of Pope Francis, actually Benedict, much of the encyclical shows the thinking of Benedict, who did what? Had completed most of the text. Benedict completed most of the text before his resignation. He basically wrote the whole thing. Francis just put his name on it. Extensive appeal. So how is this the thought of Benedict? Extensive appeal to the doctors of the church, a sacralizing of Hellenistic philosophy, and a preoccupation with 19th century atheism. And this encyclical is concerned with unitary truth, meaning truth, there's one truth. Truth is truth. Unitary truth. But of course, for America Magazine, that is a bad thing. As the object of faith, defense of the integrity of the deposit of faith, and the ecclesial context of faith, and the responsibility of the magisterium to guard the wholeness of faith. That's not a good thing for the fake Catholics, for those who want an ever-changing faith, an ever-changing church, a perversion of the faith once for all delivered to the saints, as St. Jude says. So they tell you, American Magazine says, this whole encyclical was pretty much finished by Benedict XVI, and it reflects all his thoughts. So, except for one, now here's they're trying to find something Francis actually wrote, except for one introductory passage, Pope Francis speaks of Benedict's preparation. It is more difficult to find out Francis's own contribution. We have no idea what Francis wrote. I mean, he wrote an introductory little passage. Here you go. Now we have an encyclical with four hands. Other than that, we don't know what Francis wrote. What is his contribution to this whole encyclical? American Magazine continues. This would have been the fourth encyclical prepared by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. It completes a trilogy on the theological virtues. So here you go. It is actually Francis's first encyclical is in fact Benedict's fourth encyclical. Francis just wrote an introductory passage and put his name to it. That's pretty much it. So it is not Francis's encyclical. So that's one of the three knocked out of the park. Doesn't include Francis in it. Now, as I said, sometimes an encyclical, as we saw, is addressed not only to the Catholic world and the Catholic Church, but, men of goodwill, people of goodwill. You want to read this? You're invited to it. So, for example, we have Pacem in Terris, which is encyclical Pope John the 23rd, who is it addressed to our, and why I'm harping on this, we're going to see on the last, the two so-called encyclicals of Francis. We're going to get to it. So it says here, to our venerable brethren, patriarchs, primates, archbishops, bishops, and all local ordinaries who are in peace and in communion with the apostolic see, and to the clergy and faithful of the entire Catholic world. That is who is it addressed to, and to all men of goodwill. Okay, but again, it is addressed specifically to the church. Another example of it is Pope Paul VI, Ecclesiam Suam, to his venerable, who is again an encyclical, who is it addressed to? To his venerable brethren, the patriarchs, primates, archbishops, and all local ordinaries who are at peace and communion with the Apostolic See, to the clergy and faithful, and to the clergy and faithful, meaning Catholics, of the entire world, and to men of goodwill, to all men of goodwill. You're invited to look at this Catholic teaching to Catholic faithful, men of goodwill. This is the Catholic teaching to the Catholic faithful. This is the Catholic teaching to the Catholic Church. But you men of goodwill are invited to look at this church teaching. Same thing with Pope John Paul II. Again, I think we did that. Anyways, in Redemptor Hominis, who is it addressed to? To his venerable brothers in the episcopate, meaning bishops, or the priests, the religious families, the sons and daughters of the church, meaning Catholic faithful, and to all men and women of goodwill, at the beginning of his papal ministry. Now we come technically to the real, illusory, the fake encyclicals of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, also known as Francis, the Pope of Rome, the Bishop of Rome. So, as Dr. Taylor Marshall said, only this last one, Fratelli Tutti, did not address anybody. In fact, his real first fake encyclical, really a letter, a reflection, Laudato Si. Laudato Si, which caused so much controversy. Here it is, from the Vatican website. Again, they address it as an encyclical, but it's not addressed to the Catholic Church. Laudato Si of the Holy Father Francis on care for our common home, the United Nations Environmentalist Manifesto. So this is Francis's first, the Environmentalist Manifesto of Francis in conjunction with the UN. So is it addressed to anybody? It is addressed to nobody. There is no to the Catholic faithful, to bishops, to anybody. Nothing. There's no addressed to anybody. It just starts talking about the environment. That is the first fake encyclical of Francis. And I'm not only saying that. You have to go through it. You'll find in section 62, it says, why should this document, now Francis himself calls it just a document. Why should this document, addressed to all people of goodwill, so not specifically to the Catholic bishops, to the Catholic clergy, to the Catholic faithful, to the church at large. No. Why should this document, addressed to all people of goodwill, include a chapter dealing with the convictions of believers? So he says this document basically is not addressed to believers. This is addressed to the people of goodwill. Now he's actually justifying including a chapter about the beliefs of believers. Can you believe it? Can you believe this? So Francis is basically telling you Laudato Si is not addressed to believers. It is not addressed to the Catholic faithful. It is not addressed to the church. It is addressed to all people of goodwill who are not believers. That's why he has to justify why we are include a chapter dealing with the convictions of believers. I'll read this line again, section 62 of Laudato Si. Why should this document, Laudato Si, addressed to all people of goodwill, include a chapter dealing with the convictions of believers? Why? I mean, it's not even addressed to believers. So he has to justify putting what believers believe. And in section 246 of Laudato Si, still Francis's first fake encyclical, his first letter, big letter, I guess. Section 246 says, his Environmentalist Manifesto in section 246. At the conclusion of this lengthy reflection. This is a reflection. It's a lengthy reflection addressed to people of goodwill, which we have to actually, and he had to justify putting a chapter about the convictions of believers. It's not addressed to believers. At the conclusion of this lengthy reflection, that's what it is. I propose we offer two prayers. The first we can share with all who believe in a God, who is the all-powerful creator. So I guess maybe Zeus or Odin or I don't know, the God of Islam, who considers Jesus a mere man. And of course, he's being discriminatory because he's of course, high Hindus, as I understand, they believe all these various gods are actually manifestations of the one God. These are for actually St. Augustine in his City of God, some pagans at the time, the higherly educated, were trying to say, oh, these various gods are aspects of the one God. But of course, for the 95% of the regular people, this God is different than God, and my God is different than your God. Zeus is different than Odin, is different than Loki, is different than whoever else, the different gods. So basically now he's basically excluding the vast majority of Hindus who might believe in the various gods and goddesses, but they don't have an idea of the one God. And a God, one God who is all-powerful. Maybe a Satanist will consider Lucifer to be the supreme God and the good God, and he deserves to be worshipped. So we have to, of course, pray for him. So again, that's part of... So again, as I said, this is just a lengthy reflection addressed to men and women of goodwill, and it has to have an apology for including a chapter on the convictions of believers. So obviously it's not addressed to Catholics, it's not addressed to the Catholic Church, which makes it not an encyclical. Plus it is not even addressed to anybody. So here you go, here's Pope Francis's first fake encyclical, and his second fake encyclical is the latest, Fratelli Tutti, of the Holy Father Francis on fraternity and social friendship. Again, it is addressed to nobody. Like you write a letter, you say to Joe Schmo and family, blah blah blah. This is nothing. It is addressed. There is no address to anybody. He just starts talking. It is called an encyclical, but it is addressed to nobody. And what is it about? A fraternity and social friendship. Yeah, very high doctrinal matters here. But actually, Francis tells you, again, it is exactly like Laudato Si. So the first Laudato Si was the Environmentalist Manifesto, according to the UN. And this one, Fratelli Tutti, is the socialist French Revolution Masonic Manifesto, as well, according to the UN. And what does Francis say about his latest so-called encyclical? I have sought to make this reflection, exact words as in Laudato Si. I have sought to make this reflection an invitation to dialogue among all people of goodwill. So this whole thing is a reflection, and it's an invitation for dialogue among all people of goodwill. And then he continues and says, although, now again, who is this addressed to? Again, there's no address, and there's no to so-and-so, no to nothing. Although this letter, it should be categorized as a letter, not an encyclical. Like Laudato Si is a letter. It's a reflection, a letter, not an encyclical. Not to the church, not to the faithful, not to the bishops, not to nobody. again, Francis says in this Fratelli Tutti, says, although this letter is addressed to all people of goodwill, regardless of their religious convictions. So this Fratelli Tutti is a letter. It's a reflection of Francis to all people of goodwill. It doesn't matter what they believe, regardless of their religious convictions. I don't care. You're a Buddhist, Hindu, Shintoist, you worship trees or stones, you pray to Mother Earth, Pachamama, you worship the waters and the rivers, you pray to the God of Muhammad, which, calls all those who believe in the divinity of Jesus mushrikeen and deserving of death. That's okay. I don't care. You're an atheist. You don't believe there's a God. You're an agnostic. It doesn't matter. You're a deist. Believing. It doesn't matter. This letter is addressed to all people of goodwill because it's fraternity, liberty and equality. It's like the Masonic slogan of the French Revolution. Although this letter is addressed to all people of goodwill, regardless of their religious convictions, because I couldn't care less, the parable is one that that any of us can relate to and find challenging. Again, exactly, now he's saying, okay, basically, he's giving an excuse for including a parable told by Jesus Christ in this letter addressed to all men of goodwill. It doesn't matter what they believe, regardless of their religious convictions. I don't care. But, I'm going to include the little parable of Jesus, so hopefully you guys are not offended. That's basically Fratelli Tutti. And of course, he deals with with war and with the death penalty. And he says, it's out of the context of this video, but I'm going to just include it. He says, today, so I guess yesterday was different, 100 years ago was different, 1,000 years ago was different, 4,000, 3,000 years ago was different, and maybe, who knows, maybe in 70 years it'll be different again, who knows. Today, we state clearly, who is the we? You? Francis? The death penalty is inadmissible. I guess God was an idiot then. God was legislating immorality. That's basically what Francis is saying. Today we state clearly the death penalty is inadmissible, and the Church is firmly committed to calling for its abolition worldwide. Which Church? Not the Catholic Church. Maybe the anti-church, the fake church? I don't know. And this actually encyclical was set up by a tweet of Pope Francis just before they released it, September 25th, 2020. And I have a whole video, half-hour video, analyzing this, what basically Francis talks about. I'm going to read you the tweet. We need to dismantle the perverse logic that links personal and national security to the possession of weaponry. And I have this video, it's half-hour, watch it. It deals with perverse logic. Why? Because basically he's accusing of Jesus Christ of having perverse logic, because Jesus Christ actually tells the apostles, bring your swords, bring weapons. And they actually ask for his permission to attack the soldiers when they come to arrest him. Watch my video, I'm not going to go through it. But again, one simple thing, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, section 2260 says, the covenant between God and mankind is interwoven with reminders of God's gift of human life and man's murderous violence. For, quoting God now, for your lifeblood I will surely require a reckoning. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. The Old Testament always considered blood a sacred sign of life. This teaching remains necessary for all time. So the Catechism of the Catholic Church actually quotes Holy Scripture. God himself required the execution of the murderer by man, by legitimate authorities. Now, Again, this section, still Fratelli Tutti, the Pope Francis's fake encyclical, in section 286 says, in these pages of reflection on universal fraternity. So it's his reflections. Who was he inspired with? He says, I was inspired by St. Francis of Assisi. And he starts off with his. And again, they have the fake Francis, the fake pacifist, the fake environmentalist, the fake ecumenist Francis. The fake Francis which they're pushing upon the faithful, in contrast to the real Francis. But also, so I was inspired by the fake Francis, which I like as compared to the real one, but also by others of our brothers and sisters who are not Catholic. So the inspiration of this encyclicals, Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, if you remember him, he's like the socialist Anglican bishop from South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu, and many more. These are the inspiration of Fratelli Tutti. And then, of course, he has a prayer to the Creator. Of course, there's no asking for salvation or saving of bringing people back to God, or, bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to everybody. And then there's an ecumenical Christian prayer. And that's how it ends. So this shows us that these so-called encyclicals of Francis, the first one is actually a Benedict's encyclical. The second and third are addressed to nobody. Actually, they are explicitly within the text of the documents themselves, within the text of the reflections. These are the words he uses. These reflections are addressed to anyone and everyone, people of goodwill, whatever you believe is okay. And then in both documents, there is an apology given or an excuse given for including the beliefs of believers, and even an excuse to be given for including a parable of Jesus Christ, which proves they are not addressed to the Catholic faithful or the Church or Christians. So they are as useless as the paper they're written on. But this is not it. One surprise for Dr. Taylor Marshall and all Catholics. Pope John Paul II's so-called encyclical, Ut Unum Sint, that they all may be one. His letter on ecumenism, Ut Unum Sint, on commitment to ecumenism. Again, this so-called encyclical is not addressed to anybody. It is not to the bishops, it's not to the patriarchs, it's not to the clergy, it's not to the religious, it's not to the lay Catholic faithful. It's addressed to nobody. It is Pope John Paul II's reflections, his ideas about ecumenism and how one can extend ecumenism. And actually, he's talking more to the Orthodox and Protestants than he is actually talking to the Catholic faithful in that document, in that letter, in that reflection, not an encyclical. It's not addressed to the Catholic faithful or the Catholic Church. There is no two bishops, priests, deacons, Catholic faithful, nobody. He himself says, the present encyclical, falsely so-called letter, is meant as a contribution to this noble goal of reaching full communion. Essentially pastoral in character, so it's not really even doctrinal. It seeks to encourage the efforts of all who work for the cause of unity. That's all it is. So it's basically actually addressed mainly to Orthodox and Protestants, and talks about Vatican II and ecumenism in Vatican II, but it is not addressed to the Catholic faithful, period. That's another fake encyclical, which should be put as a letter, as a reflection, as a reflection, with those two reflections of Francis. I will end this with one actually very good section of Ut Unum Sint, of that they all might be one, of Pope John Paul II. Section 18, the fundamental importance of doctrine. Here it is not a question of altering the deposit of faith, changing the meaning of dogmas, eliminating essential words from them, accommodating truth to the preferences of a particular age, or suppressing certain articles of the creed under the false pretext that they are no longer understood today. The unity willed by God can be attained only by the adherence of all to the content of revealed faith in its entirety. In matters of faith, compromise is in contradiction with God, who is truth. In the body of Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, who could consider legitimate a reconciliation brought about at the expense of the truth? Excellent words of Pope John Paul II. And these words need to be tattooed in our brains. No compromise in truth. We cannot water down truth to please those who reject it. So now this brings this video to an end. As always, it takes longer than I always expect. But we've seen, according to what the Catholic Church teaches, an encyclical is a papal letter addressed specifically to the bishops, really, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and through them to the faithful. It might actually say to the faithful as well, because now the faithful can actually go to the internet and read it themselves. Back in the day, the popes didn't address it directly to the faithful because there were no printing presses, or the printing was expensive, and it was maybe hand copied as mailed to the bishops or sent to the various bishops around the world. So it was not directly addressed to the faithful, but it was to the faithful through their bishops. But in later letters, the popes add "and to the faithful" of the Catholic Church. And even so basically it is addressed to the Church. It is addressed to the hierarchy, the clergy, and the faithful, to the whole Catholic Church, dealing with matters of faith, morals, and situations in the world, and how to remedy them. It is not a simple reflection, a lengthy reflection addressed to people of goodwill, and we have to apologize if we talk about anything Christian in it. But that is basically what it is in Francis's two falsely so-called encyclicals, Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. His first encyclical is not actually his, it is Benedict's. He just put his name on it. And we've seen that actually the same criteria is addressed with It Unum SINT of Pope John Paul II. It is not an encyclical, it is a lengthy reflection meant to encourage ecumenism and unity. But that's it. So here it is. That's it. That's all. Hope you enjoyed this video. So Taylor Marshall, thank you for lighting a little light bulb in my head. It's like, what? Not an encyclical? Never thought about that. And then when you search, you find not only Fratelli Tutti, as well his Environmentalist Manifesto, Laudato Si, and actually Ut Unum SINT on ecumenism of John Paul II. That's it. That's all. Hope you like this video. Please like, please subscribe, share, comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.